Have you ever paused to truly consider why the sacred texts, particularly the Bible, issue such an stark and uncompromising command, "Do not let a witch live"? This isn't merely a casual suggestion or a gentle admonition, it is a declaration of profound severity, echoing from the ancient past into our present consciousness. It compels us to question our preconceived notions, to peer beyond the whimsical veil of fairy tales and modern aesthetics that often shroud our understanding of what a witch truly is. What if the very concept of witches, far from being a quaint Halloween trope or a fantastical element in children's stories, originated directly from the pages of the Bible itself, bearing a truth far more profound, ancient, and disturbingly real than anything commonly preached or understood today? This revelation might very well redefine your perception of reality in the coming years, for the witches depicted in biblical narratives are entities of a darker lineage, rooted in an older tradition, and possess a terrifying authenticity rarely discussed in contemporary spiritual discourse. Before we venture forth to truly unmask the profound biblical truth about witches, let us first confront the prevailing images that occupy the collective imagination when the word witch is uttered. For many, the immediate mental canvas is splashed with the vibrant yet largely harmless imagery of Halloween. We conjure visions of figures adorned with pointy black hats, soaring effortlessly on broomsticks across a moonlit sky, perhaps tending to a bubbling cauldron filled with mysterious concoctions, or picturing a seemingly creepy old woman in the desolate expanse of the woods, murmuring arcane incantations in an ancient forgotten tongue. These are the classic archetypes etched into our cultural psyche through countless stories and visual representations, often depicting witches as harmless, albeit mischievous, figures of folklore. Yet the modern landscape has introduced a strikingly different, almost paradoxical representation. If you find yourself immersed in the digital currents of platforms like TikTok, the contemporary witch appears to have undergone a remarkable transformation. Here the witch often embodies a different kind of aesthetic, one characterized by cute crystals, bundles of cleansing sage sticks, the practice of manifesting your dream life, and the allure of moon magic, a whole array of practices and objects that coalesce into what is often described as a witchy aesthetic. To the vast majority of people today, therefore, witches occupy one of two seemingly innocuous categories. They are either silly, fantastical villains, much like the iconic Wicked Witch of the West, relegated to the realm of make-believe, or they represent a cool, fashionable spiritual trend, something perceived as entirely harmless, a mere vibe, a lifestyle choice that resonates with contemporary spiritual seeking. There is also a prevalent, more sympathetic perspective that posits witches as merely misunderstood healers, wise herbalists, or indispensable midwives, individuals deeply connected to nature who possessed an innate understanding of natural remedies and ancient healing practices, knowledge that perhaps ran contrary to the doctrines or practices of the established church of their time. And to be unequivocally fair, historical evidence does suggest that some aspects of this interpretation hold a degree of truth for specific periods throughout history. However, this is precisely where the narrative takes an astonishing and utterly transformative turn, revealing a dimension far removed from our common understanding. For if one were to truly crack open an actual Bible, not a diluted interpretation or a popular retelling, but the sacred text itself, and diligently read what it genuinely states about witches, the resultant picture is not just different, it is way darker, immeasurably older, and undeniably more dangerous. Furthermore, this biblical portrayal is intrinsically tied to profound secrets and hidden truths that most churches, for various reasons, never openly discuss. So let us embark on this journey. Let us metaphorically flip that dusty old book open and delve into the very origins of witches as they are presented explicitly and implicitly according to the unwavering authority of Scripture. Here, my friends, is where the comforting illusion of the fairy tale abruptly ceases and the raw, unvarnished truth of the Bible forcefully confronts you. The prevalent modern inclination is to hear the word witch and immediately categorize it as nothing more than an antiquated superstition. The argument often goes, back in those ancient times, people simply lacked a fundamental understanding of science, and therefore they attributed peculiar occurrences, strange illnesses, or inexplicable misfortunes to the mystical influence of witches. This perspective implicitly frames the biblical stance as a relic of a less enlightened age, a product of ignorance rather than insight. However, if one takes the time, the effort, and the intellectual honesty to actually read the Scriptures, the context and the message become undeniably more intense, more serious, and far less dismissible. The Bible, in its entirety, does not, under any circumstance, treat the practice of witchcraft as a mere joke, a baseless rumor, or an amusing anecdote. On the contrary, it treats it with the utmost gravity, unequivocally classifying it as a crime. And not just any crime, mind you, but one of the most heinous, one of the most detestable, one that demanded the most severe retribution within the ancient Israelite legal and spiritual framework. Consider for a moment the chilling directness of the passage in Exodus 22:18, which states, literally, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." The implications of this command are profound and unambiguous. The translation is stark. If an individual was apprehended and found to be actively practicing witchcraft, their fate was sealed. They were done for. There were no second chances. This was not a minor infraction, something that could be atoned for with a sacrifice or a period of penance. It was a capital offense, demanding the ultimate penalty. To further understand the gravity of this declaration, we must delve into the original Hebrew word employed in this verse, which is mekashepha. This term is far from describing some benign entertainer, a clown pulling rabbits out of a hat for amusement. Instead, mekashepha specifically refers to individuals who actively invoke spirits, those who attempt to manipulate hidden forces and who engage in secret rituals with the explicit aim of acquiring or wielding supernatural power. This is where the weight of the biblical prohibition truly becomes palpable and heavy. In the ancient Israelite worldview, witchcraft was categorically not perceived as a hoax, nor was it dismissed as mere silly illusions intended to deceive the unwary. Instead, it was universally and unequivocally regarded as a real threat. A witch, in this profoundly serious context, was understood to be an individual who audaciously attempted to tap into other spirits, into forces that, crucially, did not come from God. Consider the monumental implications of this within the societal and theological framework of ancient Israel. In a culture, a people, a nation that fundamentally believed in the singular existence of only one true God, a divine entity who not only created but also controls the universe, a witch was, by definition, an act of profound spiritual rebellion. Such a person was essentially trying to bend the rules of creation, audacious enough to attempt to pull power from demons, the dead, forbidden spirits, or whatever other illicit source of power they could lay their hands upon. And the divine law, the very bedrock of Israelite society, regarded this act with such abhorrence that it placed it on the very same list as the unimaginable horror of child sacrifice. This is not a hyperbolic statement. It is explicitly stated. Deuteronomy 18 makes this terrifying connection undeniable, declaring, "There shall not be found among you anyone who sacrifices their son or daughter in the fire, anyone who practices divination or sorcery, interprets omens, engages in witchcraft." The text continues, emphasizing the divine judgment. Anyone who does these things is detestable to the Lord. Therefore, from the unequivocal vantage point of the Bible, witchcraft was not an illusion or a fantasy. It was, in fact, real, but its reality was steeped in profound evil. It represented nothing less than a deliberate stepping into a rival spiritual system, a dark and twisted mirror image of God's holy kingdom. This profound theological conflict is precisely why the biblical condemnation of witchcraft was so utterly serious. For if one truly believes in the existence of a real spiritual realm, a realm teeming with unseen forces and beings, then the practice of witchcraft ceases to be a mere human transgression and transforms into a direct act of war against the divine order itself. This fundamental belief explains the brutal severity with which it was stamped out. If witches truly possessed the ability to channel rival spirits, they were not merely charlatans or frauds, but something far more insidious. They were spiritual traitors, actively colluding with forces inimical to the very Creator. So, when you encounter the harrowing declaration, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live," you are not merely reading an ancient legal decree, you are witnessing a profound glimpse into a world that firmly believed the supernatural was not some pretend game, but a deadly, terrifyingly real aspect of existence. Now, if you harbor any lingering doubts that the Bible's pronouncements regarding witches were mere empty threats or symbolic warnings, allow me to present what is arguably the wildest, most unsettling, and deeply illuminating witch story contained within Scripture itself. This narrative unfolds with the chilling intensity of a genuine horror movie, capable of sending shivers down the spine of even the most hardened skeptic. Picture the scene. Israel's first anointed king, Saul, is in a state of utter desperation. He finds himself in a profound spiritual void. God has seemingly withdrawn, no longer responding to his pleas, his inquiries, or his deepest fears. There are no reassuring dreams, no guiding words from prophets, no comforting visions to illuminate his path. He is consumed by terror as his formidable enemies are relentlessly closing in, tightening their grip, threatening to overwhelm his kingdom and his very existence. In this state of profound existential crisis, Saul desperately craves answers, guidance, a glimmer of hope. But what extraordinary, even unthinkable action does he resort to? In a shocking display of hypocrisy and despair, he breaks his very own law. The very king who, by royal decree, had previously banned all forms of witchcraft from his kingdom, now secretly and against all his own edicts, goes in search of a witch. Her infamous name echoes through history, the Witch of Endor. This dramatic and profoundly dark twist unfolds in 1 Samuel 28, a chapter that stands as one of the Bible's most unsettling narratives. King Saul, to avoid recognition and the inevitable condemnation his actions would invite, donned a disguise, literally concealing his royal robes, shedding the symbols of his kingly authority to become an anonymous figure. Under the cloak of night, he stealthily makes his way, sneaking through the darkness to locate this forbidden medium, this woman who trafficked in the unseen and the illicit. Upon finding her, his desperation is palpable as he begs her, "Bring up for me the one I named to you." The object of his desperate desire, none other than the deceased prophet Samuel, the very man who, by divine decree, had originally anointed Saul as king of Israel. And now, brace yourself, for this is where the story pivots from desperate plea to astonishing supernatural manifestation. She does it. No joke, it works. The biblical account, in stark and unambiguous terms, states that the woman sees a god rising out of the earth. Saul, overwhelmed by the inexplicable reality of the moment, falls prostrate on his face. And then the impossible occurs. Samuel's spirit, the true essence of the departed prophet, actually speaks. This is not presented as some cleverly mimicked voice, not a deceitful demon pretending to be Samuel, but the Bible flatly and unequivocally declares it's Samuel. And what wisdom or comfort does Samuel, summoned from the realm of the dead by forbidden means, impart to the desperate king? Far from offering solace, he rebukes Saul. His words are sharp, piercing, essentially asking, "Why did you disturb me?" And then, with the chilling finality of a death knell, Samuel drops the hammer. He delivers a devastating prophecy. "Tomorrow, you and your sons will join me." This pronouncement carries an undeniable meaning. Saul's death, and that of his lineage, was sealed. Ponder for a moment the profound implications of this sequence of events. Saul, the very king who rigorously outlawed the practice of witchcraft, secretly resorts to seeking out a witch. This witch, defying all expectations of fraud or illusion, successfully summons a dead prophet from the underworld, and this spectral presence, this ghost from beyond the veil, proceeds to curse the king, sealing his inescapable doom. Crucially, the Bible, in its unyielding narrative, does not present this as a charade or a trick. It does not say she was a fraud. It does not suggest this was some form of magical illusion. On the contrary, it presents it with unwavering conviction, as if it genuinely happened. So what profound point does this astonishing, terrifying narrative of the Witch of Endor convey? It irrefutably demonstrates that, in the ancient mindset, witchcraft was not some innocuous, fake hocus-pocus. It was, without question, a real, dangerous power. A power so potent, so disruptive, that it possessed the horrifying ability to open doors between the living and the dead. These were doors no human should pry open, gateways to realms forbidden, to knowledge and influence that lay beyond the natural order. In essence, the story of Endor reveals that witchcraft was not merely a criminal act in the eyes of God's law. It was a profoundly significant spiritual act of rebellion. An act that daringly poked holes in the natural barrier God put up to protect his people, compromising the divine boundaries established for humanity's safety. And for this audacious transgression, Saul, the desperate king, ultimately paid the ultimate price, his life and legacy shattered for lifting that forbidden curtain. This dramatic incident brings us to an essential, yet frequently unasked question. Why did ancient peoples, despite the grave warnings and severe penalties, even dabble with or mess with witchcraft at all? The answer, in its profound simplicity, can be encapsulated in a single, powerful word: control. In the harsh, unforgiving realities of the ancient world, life was an incredibly fragile existence, precarious and unpredictable. There was no comforting reliance on modern meteorological forecasts, no weather app to predict the capricious whims of nature and guide agricultural decisions. There were no sophisticated hospitals equipped with advanced medical knowledge and technology to combat disease and injury. And certainly, there was no overarching government safety net to provide security, sustenance, or protection in times of crisis. Consider the sheer vulnerability. One devastatingly bad harvest, perhaps due to drought or blight, could mean widespread starvation and the collapse of an entire community. One catastrophic plague, a virulent epidemic sweeping through a village, could decimate its population overnight. One formidable enemy army, advancing unchecked, could lead to the complete annihilation of an entire tribe, wiping out generations of heritage and livelihood. In such a relentless and uncertain world, where every moment was a struggle for survival against formidable odds, people inevitably grew desperate. And when individuals or communities reach that precipice of desperation, they become willing to grab any power they can find, irrespective of its origin or its consequences. In this desperate pursuit of influence over an uncontrollable world, various forbidden practices emerged. Some, driven by an overwhelming need for foresight or comfort, turned to necromancy, the chilling practice of calling up the dead for advice. The rationale was stark. If the living, with all their limitations, could not provide the necessary answers or assistance, perhaps the departed ancestors, dwelling in a realm beyond, could whisper secrets from beyond the grave, offering guidance or insight into an uncertain future. Others, seeking more direct influence over their immediate circumstances, worked with charms, spells, and curses, desperately trying to bend reality when it wouldn't obey their desires or needs. The ancient practice of witchcraft was therefore not the benign, almost quaint image of cute potions and broomsticks that modern culture often portrays. On the contrary, it was a deadly serious and often brutal form of spiritual leverage. The underlying belief was that if one possessed the esoteric knowledge or the forbidden ability to bribe, trick, or command a spirit, then a vast array of seemingly impossible outcomes might become attainable. Perhaps one could curse an enemy's crops, ensuring their ruin and one's own prosperity. Perhaps one could effectively protect your fields from locusts or other destructive forces, safeguarding one's vital food supply. Or perhaps, driven by more personal desires, one could force love or health or revenge, manipulating the very fabric of human relationships and well-being. The Bible, in its comprehensive condemnation, lumps all these illicit practices together under the umbrella term of sorcery, a veritable grab bag of forbidden spiritual hacks. And over it warns Israel, don't do it. The divine prohibition against these practices was not arbitrary. It stemmed from a profound understanding of their ultimate consequence. The fundamental reason for this ceaseless warning was that every time people reached for secret knowledge, they stopped trusting God. This act of seeking power or insight from illicit sources represented a profound departure from faith, a turning away from the true source of all power and wisdom. The prophet Isaiah, in chapter 47, delivers a particularly savage and biting indictment against this spiritual infidelity. God, through Isaiah, mocks ancient Babylon for its obsessive reliance on sorcery and astrology. The divine challenge is direct and sarcastically delivered. Keep on, then, with your magic spells and your many sorceries. Then a further taunt. Let now the astrologers, the stargazers stand up and save you. The inevitable and devastating spoiler that follows is that they can't. In other words, the ancient prophets, possessing a profound spiritual discernment, perceived witchcraft for what it truly was. It was the desperate, often misguided act of humans terrified of the unknown, individuals or societies who, in their profound vulnerability, reached for any power except the one who made the heavens. This crucial insight reframes the entire debate. So, when contemporary voices assert that witchcraft is nothing more than fake, harmless fun, the Bible, with its unwavering authority, fundamentally flips it. It proclaims, with an uncompromising clarity, no, it's real enough to be dangerous. The danger does not stem from the power itself being inherently holy or divinely sanctioned, but precisely because it pulls you away from the true source of life. This leads us to an even deeper inquiry. From whence did this forbidden power truly originate? This brings us to a profound twist, one that radically flips the whole idea of witchcraft on its head. Ancient believers, those who lived within the biblical worldview, did not subscribe to the notion that witchcraft was a mere illusion or an empty charade. On the contrary, they firmly believed that it was a gift from the wrong side. Let us meticulously break down this astonishing claim, drawing from ancient texts that, while not all canonical in every tradition, were profoundly influential in early Jewish and Christian thought. If one were to delve into the ancient and profoundly significant Book of Enoch, a text widely read by the early church but subsequently excluded or banned from later canonical collections, one would discover a truly mind-blowing claim. Enoch 7 and 8 detail a staggering narrative concerning beings referred to as the Watchers. These Watchers are described as angels who were explicitly not supposed to mingle with humans, yet in a profound act of cosmic rebellion, they did precisely that. These celestial beings, in their audacious defiance of divine command, broke ranks, descended to earth, and took human wives. But their transgression did not stop at mere procreation, leading to the birth of the infamous giants, the Nephilim. Far more sinisterly, these rebel angels also handed humans forbidden secrets. They became the illicit instructors of humanity, imparting knowledge that was never intended for mortal comprehension or use. Specifically, these Watchers taught enchantments and root cuttings. They initiated humans into the dark arts of sorcery, signs, astrology, and charms. In essence, these renegade celestial beings provided humanity with a shortcut to hidden knowledge. They taught humans how to audaciously bend nature to your will, how to illicitly speak to spirits, and how to fundamentally twist creation for selfish power. Why did this particular narrative, preserved in such ancient texts, so profoundly terrify ancient prophets and spiritual thinkers? Because it meant that the very origin of witchcraft was not a mere human invention, a product of mortal ingenuity or superstition. Rather, it was perceived as a spiritual leak, a profound breach in the cosmic order, a back-channel from a cosmic rebellion. The Book of Enoch portrays witchcraft as nothing less than spiritual contraband, knowledge surreptitiously smuggled from heaven's secrets down to earth. But the revelation does not end there. The Book of Jubilees, another ancient Jewish text, contemporary with the Dead Sea Scrolls and profoundly influential in early spiritual thought, repeats this idea. Further reinforcing this chilling narrative, it asserts that demons led by Mastema taught humans magic, sorcery, and incantations. This was knowledge that God never meant for mortals to use, a violation of divine decree and an usurpation of the natural order. In sum, the earliest believers, those closest to the cultural and spiritual context of the biblical narratives, did not envision witches as the silly, harmless, old hags with pointy hats that modern Halloween imagery might suggest. Instead, they envisioned them as something far more unsettling, channels, human vessels who willingly open themselves up to forbidden spirits. This profound understanding explains, with an undeniable clarity, why the Bible's condemnation of witchcraft is so exceptionally harsh, so utterly uncompromising. It is not because the practices themselves are mere nonsense, a collection of ineffective gestures and empty words. On the contrary, it is precisely because they tap into something real but rebellious, something that, while it may pretend to help, inevitably and invariably always corrupts. This dangerous reality was not lost on even the earliest Christian thinkers. The Shepherd of Hermas, a text widely popular and influential among early Christians, directly addresses this phenomenon, speaking of spirits that whisper secrets and tricks to people who crave hidden power. Similarly, the Testament of Solomon, another ancient text, recounts the legendary tale of King Solomon supposedly possessing the ability to command demons and spirits. Yet even in this narrative of extraordinary power, there is a profound and unsettling catch. That very same knowledge, if misused or mishandled, possessed the devastating potential to enslave people. Therefore, when one comprehensively examines these ancient perspectives and stacks them up against our modern understanding, the true, profound threat of witchcraft to ancient minds was not the superficial human spell itself. It was, with terrifying certainty, the spirit behind it. And this, my friends, is the profound truth that for various reasons nobody preaches with the clarity and urgency it demands. The Bible, in its unyielding authority, does not say, "It's fake, don't worry." Instead, it proclaims a far more chilling reality. It's real enough to kill you because it comes from a place you don't want to open. It is a gateway to forces beyond human comprehension and control, forces that seek to corrupt and destroy. So, the next time you hear someone casually joke that witchcraft is just harmless magic, remember this profound ancient truth. To ancient believers, every spell was a handshake with the oldest traitors heaven ever knew. It was a pact, a clandestine agreement with fallen entities, an act of cosmic betrayal that resonated with the primordial rebellion against the divine order. And this profound realization brings us to perhaps the most significant, most unsettling twist of all, leading us to ask the ultimate question: why did God allow it? And what profound insights does this reality reveal about the ongoing spiritual conflict in which we as humanity are still immersed today? Let us now pull back that curtain to gaze upon this challenging truth. Let us confront this reality with an uncompromising honesty. When the Bible, with its stark authority, declares, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live," this command undeniably sounds extreme, even barbaric, to our contemporary sensibilities. However, within the intricate and profound framework of ancient Israel's worldview, this was not merely a harsh legal decree, but an essential component of what they understood as spiritual warfare. And here, precisely, is the crucial reason why. To them, the practice of witchcraft was never, under any circumstances, perceived as a trivial party trick or a benign grandma's herbal tea. Instead, it was unequivocally regarded as a backdoor, a dangerous portal for unseen powers, entities and forces that stood in direct, profound rivalry to the one true God who had, with miraculous power, rescued them from slavery and established his covenant with them. The ancient Israelite worldview operated under an uncompromising principle: one power source or none. In their comprehensive understanding of the cosmos, the Lord, Yahweh, was not simply one deity among a pantheon of gods. He was, without qualification, the source, the origin, the fount, the singular wellspring from which all true power, life, and order flowed. Everything else, all other gods, all idols, all necromancers, all spirit mediums, were considered parasites, insidious forces that fed upon the innate human vulnerabilities of fear and the pervasive desire for control. And among all these illicit practices, witchcraft stood as the most potent and direct symbol of this profound rebellion. It represented a deeply audacious act, a human declaration saying, in essence, "I want secrets, I want power, but I don't want to wait on God." This was not merely rule-breaking, it was an act of profound spiritual treason. The ancient prophets, in their divine insight, perceived this as nothing less than treason, plain and simple. Their concern was not merely to ban a few card tricks or harmless parlor games. Their imperative was to cut off spiritual black markets, illicit channels that trafficked in forbidden knowledge and power, trading the sacred loyalty to Yahweh for shady backroom deals with other spirits. Hosea 4:12 vividly illustrates this spiritual betrayal, stating, "My people consult a wooden idol, and a diviner's rod speaks to them. The spirit of prostitution leads them astray." The text draws a direct, unequivocal parallel. Witchcraft equals spiritual adultery, a profound violation of the covenant relationship with God. The implications of witchcraft went even deeper, touching upon the very fabric of ancient Israelite society and its covenant with God. There was a profound bloodline risk involved. Many ancient cultures, including Israel, did not view witchcraft as an isolated individual sin. They perceived it as a virulent contagion, something that possessed the terrifying potential to infect entire households or tribes. This perspective sheds further light on why Deuteronomy 18 explicitly lumps witches with child sacrifice for a reason. Both of these abhorrent practices represented acts that handed territory to spirits that demanded loyalty instead of the God of Israel. The danger was not confined to one's personal dabbling in the dark arts. It directly threatened the whole community's covenant with God. The integrity of the entire nation, its divine protection and blessing, was at stake. Herein lies a crucial distinction, a twist that many people, even today, entirely miss. In ancient Israel, there existed a legitimate, divinely ordained path to seek out hidden knowledge, to gain insight into the unseen realm, to receive guidance from the divine, the prophets. If an individual or a community desired to hear from the unseen realm, to receive a genuine message from the divine, they were instructed to go to a prophet of Yahweh. In stark contrast, witchcraft was the black market knockoff of prophecy. It offered a deceptive shortcut, a way to skip the line, to bypass the divinely appointed priests and prophets, and instead invited forbidden spirits to communicate. This fundamental distinction explains why you encounter verses like Jeremiah 23, which vehemently blasts false prophets, individuals who, while perhaps claiming divine inspiration by saying, "I had a dream," were in reality secretly channeled false spirits. These were not merely mistaken individuals. They were a genuine, insidious, real threat. Therefore, when the nation of Israel enacted such severe crackdowns against witchcraft, it was not merely born of paranoia or a lack of understanding. In their eyes, tolerating witchcraft was like building an idol inside the camp. It was an act of profound spiritual compromise, a direct affront to the covenant, and if one consciously chose to build an idol to welcome illicit spiritual practices, one was unequivocally choosing sides against the God who said, "I will not share my glory with another." This divine declaration of exclusivity left no room for ambiguity. Witchcraft, in this context, was never merely a superstition. It was an underground rival religion, a direct existential threat to the very covenant that was designed to keep Israel under God's protective hand. Small wonder, then, that the penalty for its practice was so incredibly severe, so absolutely uncompromising. For if one permitted forbidden spirits to set up shop within the community, they would not merely deceive or fool individuals. Far more sinisterly, they would steal your loyalty, your land, your future. And it is this profound, unwavering commitment to an exclusive divine relationship that explains why the Bible draws such a hard, unyielding line. One God, one source, no rivals. So when you once again encounter the ancient powerful command, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live," it is imperative to understand that this was not a directive born of fear of fairy tales or childish fables. It was instead a fundamental act of defending a spiritual bloodline, a sacred lineage, a covenant people, from powers that, even in our modern age, continue to whisper today. And this brings us, with compelling urgency, to our present moment. In contemporary society, witchcraft has become strikingly trendy. Its aesthetic and practices permeate our culture, often appearing in forms that seem utterly benign, even fashionable. You can observe its subtle or overt presence everywhere. Consider the ubiquitous sage bundles on Instagram, marketed for cleansing and spiritual purification. Note the accessibility of crystals at the mall, touted for their various purported energies and healing properties. Witness the phenomenon of TikTok witches casting cute little spells to manifest a boyfriend or hex an ex, trivializing what the Bible considers a profound spiritual transgression. The prevailing popular perception is that these practices are entirely harmless, aesthetic, even. Yet the Bible's perspective, as we have meticulously explored, has consistently been way darker, infinitely more serious, and undeniably dangerous. And here is the absolute core of why this ancient, darker view remains profoundly relevant. Witchcraft in the ancient world was never a mere party trick. It was not children adorned in pointy hats waving fake wands in innocent play. It was, without question, power. A power that made audacious claims, that it could bend reality, that it could curse enemies, that it could even control life and death. But the most chilling, most unsettling dimension of this power, the part that truly pierces the modern facade, is that that power didn't come from inside the human alone. The Bible, with a consistent and often explicit voice, hints and sometimes outright says that the true source was spirits. These were not benevolent entities, but beings hungry for worship, control, and chaos. And this, my friends, is the profound twist, the unsettling truth. The fundamental question, therefore, is not, does witchcraft work? The infinitely more critical question is, who does it work for? Throughout the sacred scriptures, the consistent reason that God unequivocally labels witchcraft as an abomination is not because it was fake or ineffective. On the contrary, it is precisely because it wasn't. It was a rival source of power, a power that was spiritual, seductive, and destructive in its very essence. Its insidious danger lay in its capacity to make people trust fallen beings instead of the Creator. And this crucial insight brings us to the profound implications for today. When you engage in the practices of casting spells, using charms, or performing rituals, the Bible asserts that you're not just playing with energy. You are, in a very real and profound sense, inviting something in, something ancient, something that continues to want to be worshipped, even if it must now hide behind pastel crystals and self-care magic. This precisely is the reason the Bible draws such an unyielding, harsh line against these practices, not because the magic itself never yielded results, but because it did. And the true, crucial question for anyone engaging in or observing these practices is not simply, does it work? The real, penetrating question is, who does it serve? And if you cannot articulate a clear, certain answer to that question, perhaps it is an indication that maybe you're not the one in control after all. So the next time you casually encounter a seemingly harmless witch on TV or on a social media feed, remember this profound, ancient reality. The witches described in the Bible were not quaint figures wearing pointed hats and brewing candy potions for amusement. They were, in the starkest terms, real people whispering to spirits, conjuring the dead, trading loyalty for power they could never fully control. And here is the part of the truth that most people never truly hear, the deeper layers hinted at in ancient, non-canonical texts. The forbidden books, Enoch, Jubilees, and the hidden scrolls, do not just hint, but directly suggest that the true, ultimate source of that formidable power was not simply human imagination or psychological projection. On the contrary, it traced back to the same ancient watchers and rebel spirits who slipped forbidden knowledge into the world. This was knowledge that, once unleashed, paradoxically chained people to them in secret deals that echoed for generations. Therefore, when the Bible issues its unambiguous warning, "Don't touch witchcraft," it is not speaking about the fantastical elements of fairy tales or charming folklore. It is a profound, divine warning label. It is a stark declaration that there's something on the other side of that spell. It is a glimpse into a hidden, ancient reality, a vault of spiritual truths that organized religion often shies away from preaching.